Escapes at zoos, while rare, remain an inherent risk given the complexity of managing wild animals in captivity. Despite stringent safety measures, unforeseen circumstances or human error can lead to animals breaching enclosures, posing serious threats to both visitors and staff. Tragically, these incidents can turn fatal when innocent individuals inadvertently find themselves in the path of an escaped animal. Hit that like button and subscribe right now. In today's episode, we go over 3 times deadly animals have escaped the zoo, resulting in an innocent person's death. Welcome to Final Affliction. Zoo Boise in Idaho is home to an array of animals from around the world. Visitors can visit the zoo and view lions, penguins, giraffes, wild dogs, and Siberian tigers. These tigers are the largest of the big cats, and in the wild are confined to the southeast of Russia and small areas in China and North Korea. With so few left in the wild, each and every individual, captive or wild, is important for the species. Zoo Boise was always popular for those visiting Idaho, and when they introduced 2 Amur tigers named Taiga and Tundra, their visitor numbers shot up by 25%. The tigers were brothers who came from Lincoln Park Zoo in Chicago in 1999. They were popular exhibits at the wildlife park, but on Friday, August 16, 2000, their fate remained uncertain. The zoo was holding a fundraising event. Keeping a zoo going requires significant funds, and charity events are often a valuable source of money and potential investment. Aptly named the Feast with the Beast, the event drew in donations from far and wide. One visitor to the event was 41-year-old Jan Gold. After eating at the special sit-down meal, there was a chance to see some of the animals, and so some of the guests gathered by the doors to be taken on a brief tour. Just before 9 p.m., Jan Gold joined a small group of people for a behind-the-scenes tour of the tiger enclosure. Whilst a member of staff explained the importance of these incredible animals and the conservation efforts to save the few hundred left in the wild, somebody left a gate unlocked. It was a mistake that would change the course of the evening. A zookeeper enticed the 2 tigers closer to the indoor section of their enclosure. Fresh meat was used to lure the animals from their grassy outdoor area into their cages. From there, they could be observed up close. But one of the tigers had other ideas. It had seen the group of tourists inside the tiger house. It had locked its eyes onto the enthusiastic visitors and sniffed the air. As it followed the meat trail towards Jan and the others, it came across an unlocked gate. The latch hadn't been securely fastened. It nudged it with its nose. The gate swung open. Nobody noticed as the 600-pound, 270-kilogram cat stepped through onto the other side of the fencing. Its huge paws, 4 inches, 10 centimeters across, padded towards the open door of the tiger house. The largest Siberian tigers can grow to 3.7 meters or 12 feet long, including a 1 meter, 3-foot tail. They are predators that usually stalk their prey before pouncing on them. Prey species include small mammals like rabbits and hares, as well as deer, wild boar, and even some bears. They are powerful and strong, pouncing on their prey and using their muscular forelimbs to hold on to an animal before sinking their teeth into the neck. The tigers stepped inside the tiger house. Those inside were unsuspecting and turned at the last second, coming face to face with the fearsome cat. Immediately it pounced at the first person it saw, Jan Gold. She yelled out. Everybody else screamed as they saw the enormous tiger bring her down. They ran out of the tiger house in a blind panic, leaving Jan fighting for her life. The tiger's sharp claws dug into Jan's back, and she crumpled to the ground under its weight. Standing over her, the tiger opened its jaws and closed them around her head. Zoo manager David Wayne shouted at the animal, trying desperately to distract it, trying to get it off the woman, but the tiger had latched on and wasn't letting go. Amidst the laughter and music of the busy feast with the beast party, Police Sergeant Rich Schnebley heard something else. He strained his ears and looked towards the doors. Over the loud chatter of the charity event, he could hear blood-curdling screams. He began making his way through the crowd, pushing people aside as the screams grew louder. He had been attending the event on behalf of the policing community, but suddenly jumped into action when he heard the desperate cries. He made his way to the exit doors, following the sound of the calls for help. He didn't know what he would find, but he had his sidearm to hand and ran towards the tiger exhibit. Inside the tiger house, he found Jan underneath the enormous tiger. He immediately reached for his holstered weapon and raised it in front of him. But another police officer had already drawn his weapon. In the commotion, it was impossible to make a clean shot. It was too dangerous to fire a round into the tiger as it tussled with Jan's body. There was a chance the bullet could hit her. Instead, the other police officer aimed the gun just above the tiger's head. He squeezed the trigger, firing 2 rounds from his .45 caliber pistol. Jan screamed and writhed around on the floor. One of the rounds had appeared to hit her, but the loud crack of the gunshots had the desired effect on the escaped animal. Taiga immediately jumped backwards and headed for his cage. Zoo manager David Wayne and Rich Schnebley ran towards Jan, but as they did so, Taiga spotted them out of the corner of his eye. He turned his head just as he was about to step inside his cage. He did a U-turn. His instincts were strong. He wasn't finished yet. He leapt back towards Jan and the 2 men who were just feet from where she lay. They stepped back when they saw the tiger coming towards them. Taiga's enormous frame towered above Jan once more. Without hesitating, the police officer fired another shot, and the tiger ran back to his cage. This time, David and Rich rushed at the cage door. They pushed it hard and secured the lock. Luckily, this time, they were quick enough to close the gate behind him, and he was safely secured. The 2 men knelt down beside Jan. She was badly mauled on the back of her neck and her head, but she was bleeding from the gunshot wound in her thigh as well. They administered first aid whilst waiting for the emergency service to arrive. Afterwards, the police department claimed that one of the bullets from the police officer's gun had ricocheted off the metal bars and struck her in the thigh. But upon examination of the gunshot wound, it seemed Jan had received a direct hit from the bullet. She was in a lot of pain and was rushed to St. Alphonsus Regional Medical Center. When she arrived, she was in a serious condition. She had a broken leg from the weight of the tiger and puncture wounds to her neck and back. She also had the gunshot wound. Doctors managed to stabilize her, and she went on to make a full recovery. Following the incident, the zoo manager was put on leave until they found the cause for the attack. As news of the incident spread, the zoo received hundreds of phone calls from worried members of the public begging for them not to destroy Taiga. He was a popular animal at the zoo, and such a rare species whose role in education and conservation was hugely important. It was decided that Taiga would be spared. It was human error that had led to the attack. Somebody had failed to close the gate properly, and Taiga was only acting on instinct. It was a human error that could have cost somebody their life, and that of a rare and endangered animal. 13 years later, Taiga was to meet his end. In the wild, tigers typically live 10 to 12 years, and in captivity, 12 to 18 years. At the age of 15, Taiga was suffering from renal failure and had large tumors along his spleen. He wasn't responding to veterinary treatment, and so it was with a heavy heart that the zoo staff decided it was best to put him to sleep. His brother, Tundra, died 3 years later at the age of 18. He had cancer of the liver and pancreas, but was considered old for a tiger. Over their years at the zoo, the brothers had become part of the zoo family. They had brought in a huge number of guests and had helped raise awareness of this endangered species. In 2007, the IUCN upgraded the Siberian tiger's status from critically endangered to endangered. In the 1940s, the Siberian tiger was on the brink of extinction, with just 50 individuals left in the wild. Russia was the first to ban tiger hunting and restricted the hunting of its primary prey, too. Since then, their numbers have slowly crept upwards, with the hard-working conservation teams fighting to keep Siberian tigers alive. Maybe there's hope for the species yet. The following story is regarded as one of the most brutal and horrifying chimpanzee attacks in recorded history. Our story takes place in the tropical jungle of Sierra Leone. Inside this green paradise, a wide variety of plant life and wild animals flourished until one day a war broke out, bringing with it a never-before-seen demand for land, fuel, and resources. Sierra Leone's population of chimpanzees suffered the harshest consequences, as this war ravaged the once picturesque landscape they called home. Previously, a flourishing community of chimpanzees existed, intertwined by indestructible family bonds, and with a population of approximately 30,000. However, this population size was dramatically reduced to just a few thousand due to habitat destruction and ruthless slaughtering by the inhabitants of the jungle zone. These soldiers would typically kill the adult chimpanzees, only to abduct their young and sell them off as pets within the local black market. This prompted several animal rights activists to call for the construction of havens, where these animals would be protected from the vile greed and unceasing savagery of humans, in hopes of preserving this now endangered species. The Takugama Chimpanzee Sanctuary is one of these havens, located near the capital of Sierra Leone. This sanctuary has offered shelter for orphaned and traumatized chimpanzees for nearly 30 years. The abused chimpanzees that sought refuge in the sanctuary were scarred by years of abuse by soldiers throughout the war. For the majority of them, the slaughter of their families was their first introduction to humanity. Some had their teeth smashed in, or were confined in cramped cages for days. Others were even made to consume alcohol for the amusement of humans. Regarded as a tourist attraction, Takugama attracts visitors from across the world, shining light on the consequences and cruelty of human expansion on the local wildlife. In 2006, Alan Robertson, Gary Brown, and Richie Goody were subcontractors working on the construction of the American Embassy building in Sierra Leone when they were offered the chance to visit the Takugama Chimpanzee Refuge. The exciting offer made by their friend and local guide Melvin Mama was met with unanimous approval, and the four men called for a taxi to begin the journey toward Takugama. The cab made the 30-minute trip up a mountainside to Takugama on Sunday, April 23rd. As they sat inside the taxi, the four men admired the gorgeous countryside, while Melvin told interesting facts about the country's rich history. Unbeknownst to them, as their car mounted the final slope into the 100-acre preserve, things had gone horribly wrong on the other side of the front gates. Workers inside the refuge were in the process of feeding the chimps when a group of them suddenly became enraged and managed to escape the electrified fence surrounding the compound. This incident sparked one of the most brutal and gruesome chimpanzee attacks in recorded history. The chimps went on a rampage, tearing apart anyone who was misfortunate enough to have crossed their path. The newly formed pack of chimps consisted of 31 young adults and was led by a chimp known as Bruno, a 270-pound, 6-foot-tall alpha male who suffered from severe trauma after he was taken from his mother as an infant. After witnessing his entire family get slaughtered by humans, he was later sold on the black market for a measly $30. It's not always the biggest and most aggressive male that commands the troop in chimpanzee culture. Instead, the elders of the pack choose a deserving leader. Even if a particularly powerful male defeats and coerces all of his rivals into submission, the Chimpanzee Society of Elders may not give him their blessing to lead. Alphas are charged with the burdensome duty of looking after everyone and, if necessary, defending the entire pack down to its weakest member. Aside from being the undisputed alpha, Bruno was a massive chimpanzee by any standards. He easily towered over every other member of his pack. It seemed that Bruno held a deep-seated hatred for humans, despite the kindness later shown to him by sanctuary workers. Hatred, which the four men, alongside their driver Issa Kanu, were about to become all too familiar with. The vehicle soon came across a closed fence meant to keep unannounced visitors out. As the men sat waiting inside their car, Issa blasted his horn in the hopes that someone would come out and open the gates for them. However, the sound of the car's horn had attracted the attention of the last thing the men wanted to see that morning: Bruno. Bruno soon emerged from deep within the forest, accompanied by his group of loyal, bloodthirsty followers. The chimpanzees soon encircled the taxi, screaming and banging at its doors and windows as the group watched in horror from the inside. Bruno was so big that the group initially mistook him for a gorilla. Quickly realizing the danger they were in, Issa put the car in reverse and hit the gas pedal as hard as he could. As the car suddenly flung backwards, Bruno gave chase and easily overtook the speeding vehicle. He jumped atop the car's hood, screaming angrily as he displayed his terrifyingly sharp teeth. He began bashing the car's hood and front windshield in an attempt to get inside the car. As the car continued to roll downhill, Bruno would shift his focus onto the vehicle's rear windows, smashing through the glass and beginning his assault by mauling Melvin. Bruno began biting his hand while viciously shaking his head, which tore through the flesh and bone, while Melvin screamed out in pain. He struggled to fight him off with the help of his friends, but Bruno was too strong. Desperate to escape their predicament, one of the men told Issa to shift the automobile into forward gear. Upon doing so, the vehicle abruptly came to a stop and veered off in a new direction. Bruno, whose sharp teeth now sank as deep as they could inside Melvin's arm, was caught off guard by the sudden change in motion and was flung back out of the same window he came in through. Alan and Gary grabbed Melvin by the legs just before he was fully dragged out by Bruno, and the two men began hoisting him back inside the car. After the shock of the attack wore off, the pain began to set in. To Melvin's horror and disbelief, almost half of his hand, along with 3 of his fingers, were now gone. Gary attempted to calm Melvin down while tearing off a piece of cloth from his shirt to wrap around his hand, which now resembled a drooping mass of skin. Issa was beginning to lose his grip as fear and anxiety began to take over his mind. He was a local of Sierra Leone and knew what chimps were capable of. He had witnessed with his own eyes how a horde of chimpanzees could tear apart a human within seconds. Issa threw caution to the wind and continued pushing forward, driving right through the bloodthirsty horde of chimps toward the locked gate of the sanctuary. He had every intent of ramming through the gate as the others pleaded for him to slow down. Eventually reaching top speed, the vehicle collided with the heavy metal gates. The collision was so violent that it briefly knocked everyone unconscious. Gary was awoken by the gut-wrenching sound of Melvin's screams. Gary looked around the now run-down vehicle, only to notice everyone had vanished, and he was alone in the car. Gary turned his eyes to where the screams were coming from, only to witness Bruno dragging helpless Melvin away from the car as the vicious horde began ravaging him. Adamant on saving his friend, Gary picked up a sharp wooden log after exiting the vehicle, while letting out an angry roar in hopes of attracting Bruno's attention away from Melvin. Most wild chimpanzees shy away from direct confrontation with humans, even though they are much stronger physically. A human's natural posture makes them appear taller and more intimidating to the chimpanzee. Domesticated chimpanzees, however, or at least the ones who spent a good portion of their lives living among humans like Bruno did, quickly realize the physical advantage they possess over humans, both in terms of strength and agility. Bruno, who accepted the challenge, began the charge towards Gary, pounding and flailing his arms around as he stood on his back legs to appear taller. Bruno, who was 6 feet tall, easily towered over Gary, who was only 5'9". But Gary remained calm as the beast leapt onto him. Gary raised up his weapon, struck Bruno in the neck and knocked him down. Bruno attempted to get up, but Gary wouldn't let him. Bruno's pack froze in fear as Gary pummeled him over and over with the wooden log. Bruno, who later gave up and began showing submissive behavior towards Gary, retreated back into the forest and disappeared. Witnessing the defeat of their leader, the angry horde of chimps grew even quieter as they dissipated into the forest from where they came. After his victory, Gary turned his eyes toward Melvin while trying to pull him up onto his feet. Melvin could no longer stand on his own, as it appeared Bruno had bitten off most of his right foot. After making sure the horde was gone, Gary informed Melvin was going to find help. As he traversed the unfamiliar forest, he eventually came across Richie and Alan. He instructed them to go and find help while he tended to Melvin, but before they left, he noticed Issa was nowhere to be seen. Richie informed Gary that after Issa's failed attempt at breaching the sanctuary's metal gate, he exited the vehicle and climbed over it, while leaving the rest of them to fend for themselves. As he headed toward the main road, Gary nodded in disappointment before warning the two men to stay vigilant and watch their backs. After eventually getting back to Melvin, he tied another piece of cloth around his right foot in attempts to stop the bleeding. Melvin leaned on Gary's back for support as the two made their way toward the main road, where they eventually came across a military van. Apparently, Richie and Alan had managed to reach a military patrol unit and inform the soldiers of their whereabouts. The van soon picked them up and rushed Melvin toward the nearest medical facility, where he could receive treatment for his injuries. Gary breathed a sigh of relief as he knew Melvin and the others would be okay, yet he still couldn't believe or fully process the events of this horrific day. While Gary, Melvin, Richie, and Alan all made it out safely, a crueler fate awaited Issa, who was later found bloody and torn apart. His jawless, disemboweled body was ravaged beyond recognition. The angry horde of chimpanzees appeared to have caught up with him, tearing all 4 of his limbs from his body before feasting on his remains. Bruno, on the other hand, could never be found. While 27 of the 31 escaped chimps were eventually retrieved, Bruno was among the 4 who were not. Many attempts at locating and bringing back Bruno were launched, and all were met with failure. Even though sightings of Bruno were regularly reported, to this day he still manages to somehow evade his pursuers. It's almost as if he's developed heightened senses that warn him when he's being hunted by humans. Fitting, considering the amount of abuse he'd suffered because of humans. The group will never forget their close encounter with death in the forest of Sierra Leone. Gary, in particular, suffered from nightmares for months after the terrifying incident. He considers himself lucky that he managed to fight off Bruno and rescue Melvin. He's thankful of being able to reach safety, unlike Issa, who was tragically ambushed by the savage beasts, screaming in horror as he succumbed to his final affliction. The Siberian tiger, sometimes referred to as the Amur tiger, is one of the most majestic animals on Earth and is the largest of all big cats. It is a species of tiger native to the forests of Russia, China, and North Korea. It is distinguished by its enormous size and powerful strength. To put it into perspective, some males weigh up to 660 pounds, equivalent to the weight of a large motorcycle. In addition to their massive size and strength, Siberian tigers have an incredible bite force comparable to that of a hydraulic press or a large crocodile. It is estimated that their bite force is around 1,000 pounds per square inch, strong enough to crush bones and kill large prey, like elk, with a single bite. A human's bite force is only around 160 pounds per square inch. Consequently, the Siberian tiger has one of the strongest bites of any land mammal, helping them become one of the most feared predators in the wild. If that's not enough, Siberian tigers are also powerful swimmers and are not averse to entering the water to hunt or escape danger. While these creatures are highly reclusive, they are at the absolute top of the food chain. Needless to say, they are incredibly dangerous to humans, especially if threatened or provoked. However, because these creatures are now considered endangered, conservation and protection efforts have been made throughout the years, including keeping tigers in zoos. Unfortunately, Siberian tigers have large home ranges, and being kept in a zoo may decrease the tiger's well-being, making them more agitated. Some people prod, tease, or otherwise provoke the animals in the zoo, hoping to invoke an exciting reaction from the animal, which creates a dangerous situation. This was the case with Carlos Sousa Jr. and his friends on that fateful Christmas day in 2007. It was June 25, 2003. The Denver Zoo was home to a small population of Siberian tigers. These magnificent creatures were part of a carefully managed breeding program that aimed to conserve and increase the genetic diversity of the species. In a large enclosure, a female Siberian tiger was born. The zookeepers and caretakers named it Tatiana. Born in captivity, Tatiana was not really an aggressive tiger and had no problems with people. On December 16, 2005, she was taken and permanently moved to the San Francisco Zoo to mate with a 14-year-old Siberian tiger named Tony. Everything was well until December 22, 2006, when Tatiana attacked her veteran zookeeper, Lori Comachin. In trying to feed her, Lori violated safety protocols and entered the tiger's enclosure alone without proper notification to other staff members. As Lori approached, Tatiana attacked her by biting and clawing at her, seriously injuring Lori's head, neck, and upper body. Hearing Lori's screams, the other staff members rushed to the scene to help. Thankfully, they were able to safely remove Lori from the enclosure and call for medical assistance. Unfortunately, this wasn't the last time Tatiana would make headlines. It was December 25, 2007. Carlos Sousa Jr. and his friends, brothers Amritpal and Kulber Dhaliwal, arrived at the San Francisco Zoo, excited to see the animals up close. Carlos was 17 years old at the time, while Amritpal and Kulber were 19 and 23, respectively. The three men marveled at the lions, the grizzly bears, and the primates, but it was the Siberian tiger exhibit that drew their attention the most. As they approached, they saw the magnificent Tatiana pacing back and forth, the creature's amber eyes fixed on them. Carlos and his friends were in awe of the tiger's size and beauty. They watched as she crouched down, muscles ripping under her thick fur, and then pounced on a toy that had been left in her enclosure. Carlos laughed as he watched the tiger play, but then he noticed something that made his blood run cold. He saw that the wall separating the tiger from the visitors seemed shorter, and that it appeared to be lower at one end of the enclosure than the other. Carlos pointed this out to his friends, but they laughed it off, saying that there was no way the tiger could jump over the wall. After all, there were barriers and trenches in front of the wall designed to prevent such a thing from happening. Amritpal and Kulber decided to do something stupid. The two brothers decided to taunt Tatiana. Kulber picked up a pine cone and tossed it toward the tiger in the enclosure. Tatiana stopped pacing and turned her head toward the brothers. Seeing what happened, Amritpal grabbed a stick and threw it in the enclosure. Suddenly, the two began shouting at the tiger, hoping they would get a reaction. Seeing their reckless behavior, Carlos did not want to participate and tried to stop his friends. They listened, but laughed it off. However, it was too late. Tatiana was circling in the enclosure. She jumped from the bottom of the dry moat to the top of the wall, gaining enough height over the top to pull herself over the wall. She eyed Amritpal and immediately jumped on him. The tiger's ferocious claws and teeth ripped apart Amritpal's skin. As Kulber screamed in terror, Carlos tried to save his friend by shouting and throwing things at the angry creature. He then tried pulling Amritpal, but this only provoked Tatiana even more. Tatiana focused on Carlos and decided to pounce on him, quickly knocking the 17-year-old to the ground. The tiger then decided to pull him away from the group, mauling him and biting him in the head and torso. Meanwhile, Amritpal and Kulber ran for their lives toward the zoo cafe 300 yards away. However, since it was already closing time, the cafe was locked. Although the two brothers screamed for their lives, the cafe employees did not think much of it, suspecting that the screaming person was mentally ill and there was no actual animal attack. Eventually, Tatiana arrived at the vicinity and began attacking Kulber. Finally, the cafe employee called 911. prompting emergency services and armed authorities to respond.
I don't know if they're on, but they're screaming about an animal that had attacked them, but there's no animal out. He's talking about a third person, and I don't see a third person.
Is he saying that he was bitten?
He's saying that it's a don't now. He's not drunk.
Is he saying, is the patient saying that he was bitten by an animal?
He's saying that it's bitten by an animal, but there's no animal escape because he could just be crazy.
Okay.
Okay.
4 police officers were dispatched to the area, and the entire zoo was locked down to prevent Tatiana from escaping. What the officers saw, however, was a gruesome sight. It was Tatiana biting down on Culber, while Amritpal was on the ground, bleeding and screaming for help. The officers pointed their guns at the creature, but they hesitated for fear of hitting Culber. One of the officers created a distraction, forcing Tatiana to focus on them. As Tatiana angrily turned her attention to the noise, the officers shot her in the forehead, effectively killing the magnificent beast. When the paramedics scoured the scene, they found Carlos dead near the tiger enclosure. He had blunt trauma to his head and neck, scratches and bite marks to his head, neck, and chest, and skull and spinal fractures. His jugular vein was also severed in half. In the immediate aftermath of the attack, the zoo was closed while authorities investigated the incident and assessed the safety of the animal enclosures. It was learned that the walls for the enclosure were only 12.5 feet high, as opposed to the standard of 16 feet. The surviving victims, Culber and Amritpal, received medical treatment for their injuries. The attack also sparked widespread public concern about the safety of zoos and the treatment of captive animals. Some criticized the zoo for failing to properly secure the tiger enclosure, while others questioned the ethics of keeping wild animals in captivity. While Culber and Amritpal filed a lawsuit against the zoo, there were some interesting developments in the case. The subsequent investigations revealed that the 3 had alcohol in their system. Amritpal had twice the legal limit for operating a vehicle. For Carlos and Culber, it was still under legal limits. However, authorities also found evidence of from the 3 men. On December 25, 2008, a life-sized sculpture of Tatiana was unveiled at the community garden on the Greenwich Steps at 274 Greenwich. A year later, the lawsuit between the 2 brothers and the zoo was settled for $900,000. Meanwhile, a lawsuit by Carlos's parents was settled on undisclosed terms. In that same year, Amritpal was sentenced to spend more than a year in state prison due to run-ins with the law, including probation violations, evading arrests, and speeding. Additionally, after filing the lawsuit, Amritpal was immediately arrested on suspicion of shoplifting. In 2012, Culber died of undisclosed reasons at the age of 24. It's very obvious from public records that the 2 brothers were likely provoking Tatiana, causing her to wreak havoc. Additionally, it was doubly sad that after Carlos tried saving his friends, they ran away from him to desperately save themselves. Ultimately, the aftermath of the Siberian tiger attack was a somber reminder of the dangers of interacting with wild animals and the importance of maintaining proper safety measures to prevent further tragedies. This story goes to show that even while visiting a zoo, accidents still happen, and if you aren't careful, it can lead to your terrifying final affliction.